So I'm Karen Christensen. In my real life, in my day job, I am a publisher and author. I do a lot related to China and sustainability. And both of these things are part of what led me into working on trains. Although as a former English major, the idea that I would be focused on things like steel rail, and I can tell you what the grade is of the rail that's going in on the Housatonic Line in Massachusetts. No one would ever have expected that of me. I live in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I'm also very New York focused, and that really is part of how I got involved in this. I'm working from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and now over to Graham Lewis, who is in Georgia.
Yes, I'm Graham Lewis. I'm here in Savannah, Georgia. I'm a second year double major in economics and math at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And I found this program after looking through for an internship in the hard job market that was this spring. And I've really enjoyed it so far. And I'm looking forward to continuing helping. I've really learned a lot. Especially in terms of the history of trains and what the actual movements towards the implementation across the northeast going forward. And I'm looking to where this movement goes this summer and beyond.
I believe you're muted, Karen.
Yes, sorry, thanks. Okay, Ethan, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ethan Michalowski. I'm currently in Wisconsin, but I'm also a second year at Yale University in New Haven. I'm studying economics and political science and was attracted to this campaign because I really value the work they're doing, especially in the Northeast. I got to see firsthand the rail systems at play there, and it was something incredibly interesting to me, and I wanted to continue especially promoting sustainability and the connections between rural and urban communities.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we'll jump into, we have another intern who may be able to join us and I can introduce him then. But I am going to share my screen and I'm going to give you a little walk through, a ride through. Can you hear me? Ethan, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we
can. Okay, good. Thank you. And you can see the screen, I take it. Okay, super. This is an introduction to the train campaign. This particular shot, I think I took very soon after starting the campaign. It's a bit of the line. Those of you in Connecticut will be very familiar with train tracks like this. I'm told that there is a bit of track down in Connecticut that was around when Custer made his last stand. These tracks are not quite as old, but they're 100 years old. Fortunately, these are being replaced. You'll see some of that in a later slide. The Housatonics beginnings, it goes back to 1836, ran from Pittsfield down to New York, and it provided passenger service until 1971. Still provides freight service. This is one of the things that makes this line and certain other lines in the country really attractive in terms of investment, because they do have, they're still operating rail lines, and the challenge is only to reinstall, revive passenger service, which is certainly challenging, but by no means impossible. This is a map that, I love these old maps because you can see just how many train lines there were. We'll be sharing this PowerPoint online, and it's being recorded so that other people can watch it. It even came up and branched out, as you can see. Now, I know that many people in Connecticut have seen or heard of the film, The Last Train to Pittsfield. There's a little photograph here from that video, and I'm going to show you not, now I just have to get out of I have to show it directly from my computer. It is here. This is just a clip from The Last Train to Pittsfield. I apologize if it may not play quite as well as we'd like.
All done, 120 years of service. All gone.
You're sure it's the last time?
Well, we've had 4 last runs, but this is the last run. This is the definite last run.
How do you feel?
Not too happy about it.
Really?
I'm going to miss the run very much. It's
How long have you been on it?
about 3.5 years as an engineer, and I fired up here for 12 years.
12 years.
And
You remember the first time you drove it as an engineer?
yes, back in October '67, and I was nervous as heck because I've handled freight trains before, but I never handled a passenger train. You know, all by myself.
And it's different.
It's much different. You have to take in consideration you got people instead of boxcars behind you.
So how did it go, the first run?
Did very well, on time. That's what counts.
Yeah.
On time. But I'm going to miss the runs here now. I've grown to like this line. In fact, love it, as a matter of fact. Well, you better get on board. We've got just about a minute left.
Okay.
Don't want to leave you.
Okay, that's right.
We need the money.
Okay.
The train engineer Pete McLaughlin is driving today doesn't have a name but a number. It's called 136 North, and it runs 89 miles from Danbury, Connecticut to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The route it takes has served this region for 130 years. It was first called the Housatonic Railroad after the famous river it follows most of its length. It then became the New Haven, and finally the Penn Central. But by those who rode it and worked it, it has always been known as the Berkshire Line. In its prime, when 25 trains a day once passed through Danbury, it carried thousands of people from New York and Long Island to the hotels and resorts of the Berkshire Hills. In 1965, service was cut to weekends. In '69, they took off the parlor cars and diners. And all that's left now is a single, self-propelled diesel car.
You got to work on a weekend. This is the run to work. I mean, it's not working really. It's a picnic, an outing. It's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of people. And like I said, if you got to work on a Sunday and a weekend, this is the run to do it.
You think they'll ever bring the line back?
Maybe not for quite a while. It may in some future years, but I don't really think so. I think this is the last run.
And so, one fine day in the 1970s, 250,000 people in western Connecticut and Massachusetts lost a piece of their history and commerce. Most of them didn't even notice. But perhaps someday, they will want it back.
All right, now let me get back to our PowerPoint. So you've seen this clip. That was just some edited extracts. It's a 35-minute film that we'll be showing in a couple of weeks in its entirety online. But obviously our focus is the next train to Pittsfield. And this is a film we made. Some of you will recognize. This is the Danbury Railroad Museum. Some of our volunteers went down, and over there at the right, you'll see engineer Pete McLaughlin being interviewed. So we have some 2019 footage that we'll be including in the film that we're making. Now, where did the train campaign begin? It really began in China. I'm just making sure someone will ping me if you can't hear. It began in China because I'd been to a city called Hangzhou, which is south of Shanghai, where some of the big tech companies are located. And I took a high-speed train into the most beautiful place. And when I came home, I was bringing an Australian friend up to the Berkshires, and I thought of all the opportunity that there would be for businesses to develop, for people for families to move out of the congested urban areas, to have a bit more space, a bit more greenery, but still continue to have very vibrant, diverse lives. And so it was quite a casual thing, but I reflected on that in one of my publishing company's newsletters. And I heard from people all over the world, their stories about trains, their laments about the fact that America doesn't have a good train service. And so I'm afraid I I did what we started a petition, we started a blog. I had some t-shirts designed, and I dragged my employees out onto the railroad tracks in the snow for our first photo shoot. Our mission is to foster transportation networks that connect communities, that connect rural communities, that connect rural communities to the thriving urban centers. We're focused mostly here on New York, but it's a lot of our work in Massachusetts is also focused on connection to Boston. And there's some very interesting things going on there. We're also really concerned about climate change and the kind of public health issues that are coming into the discussion of transportation, especially during this time when we're looking at issues of equity and looking at the way that certain communities are much more impacted by COVID-19, for example, because they have respiratory issues, which are often the result of our over-dependence on the car. Now, we have been working in Connecticut for some time. When we started out, a couple of years later, we found that there was a group working in northern Connecticut in North Canaan, and was also running a petition. And between the two organizations, we had 10,000 signatures. This was in about 2015. This was a rally. I don't know if anyone on the call remembers. It was the Restore Our Railroad rally in front of the then rather decrepit looking Canaan depot, which is now beautifully restored and has a pub in it. We will have to, when we can all gather again, we'll have an event there. This was a freezing cold day, but lots of people turned out. Now, that happened really very, very soon after there was major progress in Massachusetts under the leadership of then Governor Deval Patrick, who saw who had the vision, who shared our vision for passenger rail, for a passenger rail connection between Pittsfield and New York City. And he led the effort to purchase the line, the 37 miles of line in Massachusetts for the Commonwealth so that they could be upgraded. And there was a commitment, a total commitment of some $113 million. That has not all been spent. I'm afraid that in Massachusetts, people say this is all held up because Connecticut won't participate. Now, I realize there are reasons for that, and those are things we need to talk about now, how to make it happen. Because there are tremendous benefits to passenger rail service. This was done by a leadership group in Berkshire County, young leaders sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. And they took some of the figures that had been included in a study produced by a Williams College professor about the benefits in terms of tax revenues, in terms of jobs created. The total that Professor Shepard came to was $1 billion over a decade in increased economic activity. In Berkshire County alone, the study did not look at anything in Litchfield County or further south. So here's a map that shows where the Housatonic Line runs through western Connecticut. It crosses between Sheffield and North Canaan. And it goes down through Cornwall Bridge, Kent, New Milford, Danbury. The old Berkshire line went down all the way south to the coast and into New York. But there's considerable interest in going on the what's called the Maybrook Line between Southeast and Danbury, and making that the route going over to Brewster or Southeast and down on the Metro North Line. The benefits are tremendous. The convenience to citizens are tremendous. Actually, I was talking to someone who was instrumental in bringing the Metro North Line up to Wassaic, and one of the Metro North was concerned there might not be enough, enough ridership, but the parking lot was packed almost immediately and had to be expanded. And if any of you use that line, actually you use it further south, you probably know the congestion issues in the parking lots better than I, because I catch it at Wassaic, which isn't too bad. And if you look at the license plates in those parking lots, they are, perhaps the majority are Connecticut and Massachusetts plates. So Metro North, it will be a key partner in what we do now. I had to include this sign because I saw it on the wall of the iron rail in New Milford, June 1936, a few years back, and one of the old schedules. It's really fun to look at old schedules. But let's think about what's happening now. This is 2018. These are new rail. This is modern welded rail. These pieces, actually, you can't see anything close to the whole thing because these pieces of steel are a quarter of a mile long. And they have been laid from the border with Connecticut all the way up to Pittsfield, 37 miles. And they are in place along the track. And they've been cut into exact sections. Here you can see this is in Great Barrington. This is the same bit of line that you saw at the very beginning. And along at the sides are these very long curved pieces of the modern rail that will replace the old jointed rails. Our trains will not go clickety-clack anymore. They'll be much, much smoother, much less vibration, much less noise. As we work across the border, we have been trying to get down to different towns in Connecticut. This was last summer. It makes me really nostalgic. Last summer, and I guess in the winter, but just last year, that we won't be able to do these things for a little while now. But how we really appreciate the support that we've had from legislators like Maria Horn, the state rep from North Canaan, and then Mayor Pete Bass and Rep Bill Buckby. I wanted to show you something that came up. I think that those of you who live in any rural area will appreciate this. This was a map that I was shown in 2018 of a project called Rebooting New England. Very grand, visionary project for connecting Boston and New York to the older industrial cities of New England. And, so you see quite a variety of lines there. But look out where we are. Western Massachusetts, Western Connecticut, they're nothing for us. But they have since added, this is the east-west line that we're working on, to Pittsfield. And there's our line, the Housatonic. And then there's also a project up in North Adams. A sustainable future depends on rail. This is a bumper sticker that we made. I'd rather be riding the train. So what's happening now moving forward? The upgrades are underway. The lines in Massachusetts are being worked on right now. And there is a tremendous amount going on related to passenger rail in Washington. There have been proposals, a bill in the Senate from Senator Ed Markey, and another Massachusetts representative in the House of Representatives called Seth Moulton has produced a bill on rail. But the really most important thing is, I'm sure you've all heard about the infrastructure bill we were supposed to have. Well, in essence, Congressman Richard Neal, who comes from Springfield, has actually announced just last week at Union Station in Springfield that he is going to next week actually present to the House an infrastructure bill, a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill, which includes many different things, but rail is a considerable part of it. And not just Amtrak, but also railway that would connect urban centers, that would support the development of rail from urban centers like New York City to rural communities like those of Western Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. I think next week we'll see the actual bill released. We're working together. We formed the Western Mass Rail Coalition, where we have good friends now at the new Milford Riverfront Revitalization Committee. And we're working in Massachusetts with Transportation for Massachusetts. I'm also on the council, the National Council for the Rail Passengers Association. So we're really broadening our focus. But, you know, we started by thinking about the Housatonic Line, and that's what we want to talk to you more about today. Feel free to contact me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get back to everybody. Okay, I'm on. We back? We're live?
Yes.
Okay, super, super. Okay, now anyone is welcome to fire questions to us. And Graham and Ethan, do feel free to jump in with anything you want to add and add to what I've said too. Oh, somebody's got a hand up, allowed to talk. All right, someone's asked to talk. All right, this is the first time we're doing it. Here, Diane, go right ahead. I think you need to unmute yourself is what I'm seeing.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
There you are.
Seeing a big D instead of my face. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I live in New Milford.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very involved locally. I'm on the Board of Finance, and I'm soon to be more involved in the waterfront, riverfront revitalization project here in town. I have heard some objections from people who have lived here for a long time. I'm a relatively new person to town. I've lived here for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
The concern is primarily the sound and the speed and the frequency of the trains that might be coming through. Can you address those issues?
I'd be happy to. I saw that there was a bit of discussion about this on Facebook the other day.
Right.
That somehow it's funny. People either see the revival of trains as being something very nostalgic, like little old-fashioned steam trains. I'm afraid our first logo for the train campaign was a train with steam coming out the top, and someone said, "Karen, please, you can't do that." But then we seem to go all the way the other way, and think and imagine like a Chinese high-speed train crashing through, racing through New Milford. And frankly, when I came back from China, that's what I had in mind. I just was like, but in a positive way, because actually these trains are small and quiet. High-speed trains are not. But in any case, someone, I don't have a background in engineering by any means. So, I mean, someone looked at me and said, "Have you looked around, Karen? Do you see the terrain we live in? There are mountains everywhere and rivers everywhere. People build high-speed trains on big, flat, open places, apart from the land issues. So we are talking not about high-speed trains. We're talking at most 8 trains each way a day that would go through a town, and not very long trains. They would go through a town in a couple minutes. So it is the trouble is it's hard to visualize these things when it doesn't exist. And it is important. Noise is important. But modern trains, there are a host of ways from all the way from the bed on which the train actually runs, where the rails are placed, the type of rail, the type of train. They do not have to be noisy. It's not, safety is the main issue. Trains can be incredibly quiet, but you don't want them to be too quiet because they are big, heavy things moving fairly fast. But the top legal speed a train on this line, as certainly the line that's being put in Massachusetts, is about 70 miles an hour, and it's fairly curvy. I'm sure all of you have seen this line. The Housatonic Line does curve, and to be safe, you have to slow down around curves. We're not talking about a super fast trip. We are aiming to have a comfortable trip, a modern 21st century trip with Wi-Fi, of course, so you can comfortably work while you're traveling, but not endless trains tearing loudly through New Milford. And these are things that have to be, would absolutely be worked out with the community.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. Now,
We have a couple of questions in the chat and one in the Q&A. I think Q&A. Oh, Graham already answered that. Wonderful.
oh, good.
Maybe if you want to read it out for everybody, though, just in case they don't have access. Or we
Yes.
could move on.
It's answered. Yeah, Graham, can you go ahead and do that?
Oh, I was talking about, so the train from Boston to Pittsfield right now is actually a very big topic of discussion concerning the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And recently they've come out with a few alternatives and different plans for the train. And at first they were advocating for bus service actually to be extended, and that was quickly shot down by the group. So now it's full-scale train service out to Pittsfield, and we're currently trying to advocate to extend that proposed line either to Albany or New Haven, depending on which state or method of funding would be possible. So that way we can just have an increased revenue along the line and try and generate, essentially make it a proposal that kind of draws more attention to the prospect of profit. But right now, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation is currently looking at an in-state route, and they're trying to draw up a formal proposal to start construction on the plan.
And one of the things that's become that sort of moved that forward, it was a study in Massachusetts, but because of this big infrastructure bill that is going to be announced, and certainly you're going to be hearing a good deal about it, because it is big and it is something that both parties have said that they want. And because the congressman who has announced it, Richard Neal, from Springfield, is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. That's why it's coming from him. That's why it's important, because he is the chair of the committee that it handles such matters. And he is from Springfield, and he is absolutely determined to make the East-West Rail project part of it. But the government's not going to fund a study. They're going to fund a project. So there's actually now real emphasis on the part of Massachusetts Department of Transportation, to make it a project. And it's actually really important to the Housatonic Line project, because it also would terminate, or it would go to Pittsfield. It's actually intended to then go to Albany, but it would make Pittsfield a connecting point. So it is actually really relevant to the Housatonic Line. These things, one line, trains are not A to B, B to A. They're systems, and each one amplifies the other. So, and we have a chance to show how these cross-border connections, it's a challenge. The departments of transportation have to work together. They don't have as much experience as you might think in doing that. Highways are kind of done up to the state line. Rail lines need to be done in partnership. But there are models in the Pioneer Valley that Connecticut and Massachusetts have worked together, and the Downeaster from Maine that goes through New Hampshire down to Boston. There's the Vermonter that goes up along, into Vermont. So there definitely are models. The funding in Connecticut is an issue. Massachusetts was willing to put in essentially half the money to do the project in 2014, but Connecticut did not, was unwilling to. Partly, we know that there have been budgetary challenges, and there certainly will continue to be. But federal dollars will be invested, are already being invested in rail. The CARES Act included very substantial investment or support for both Amtrak and for the regional transportation authorities. So we are going to see change there. But you can all help too by ensuring that your representatives at the state and the national level know that you see real benefit in passenger rail. This isn't just about how much it costs, it's what it will do for our communities, how it will promote sustainable business, how it will promote sustainable travel.
There are 2 more questions in the chat, by the way.
Okay. So about barriers, I really think that in the case of the Housatonic Line, it really is simply a budgetary issue. We don't have right-of-way issues. There are really no impediments. This is, as rail projects go, this is about as low-hanging fruit as you could ask for, with benefits that can be can be documented quite easily, that can be quantified. There's another question about where would parking be at New Milford. Now, I can't speak to that because it hasn't been studied, but what I can tell you, and you might want to take a look at it, in I think it was 2014, maybe 2015, so very soon after the purchase of the line, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation spent $240,000, nearly $250,000, a substantial amount, to study the train locations, the station locations in Berkshire County. And this is quite a complicated process because they have to look at wetlands, they have to look at traffic patterns, they have to think about the who owns the land now, and they have to also weigh what's the issue of what's called transit-oriented development, TOD. Where can you put a station that it will benefit people the most, that it will spur the most economic activity, that will support healthy town life, which is, I think, what people in all of our towns, we want vibrant towns that aren't overcrowded with traffic. We want shops and restaurants to be, have plenty of customers. So what they do is they look at that very carefully. And one of the things that is a standard perspective now in planning is that the train stations should be in town centers, not placed outside. If any of you have been to the Wassaic station, it is a classic of placing. I should send the interns haven't seen this, but when I have people come up who've never been in the area and they come up to Wassaic, I say, when you get there, don't panic. I know you're going to look around and you're going to see, if I'm not there yet, you're going to see nothing but hills and trees. And you're going to think, I'm out in the back of beyond. But what they did is they placed the station 3 miles south of a little town. So people get into their car at the station and they drive through the town. Very sad. One of the things in terms of parking I will mention is that we also feel strongly that every station should have as many paths or trails to it and places to lock up bicycles. We don't want just that people should always feel they're going to be driving to the station, so that there are vast amounts of parking needed. Now I have a question here from David Haas. I'm going to allow David to speak. I did see David McCluskey was, okay, here we go.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I believe it was last year the city of Danbury was interested in running Metro North trains over the Maybrook to New York, because
Yes.
I think it was just faster.
Yeah.
And Metro North entertained that proposal. How did that go?
Well, the Metropolitan Transport Authority has provided a grant of $1 million to study the restoration of passenger service on that 14 miles of track. It will require a new track, I understand. Now, I don't know where the study's gone. I don't know if there's anyone from Danbury on the call who could answer that question. But that is a substantial commitment on the part of New York to that study. It's very good news for the Housatonic Line, because that is the route that we believe needs to be taken. So that's just basically that's another section of the line that has dollars being invested in it, because people think that is will be a good thing for the people of Danbury and for those of us further north. Does that answer your question? I know not completely, but
Yeah.
I don't know what's actually happened.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
So what is the travel time distance between the Danbury branch versus the Southeast Metro North branch? I assume that's why we want to do this.
Yes. And I am not an expert in the problems of the rail system going straight south, but I gather that is, this is one of the things that's good about having this conversation with you, because we find out the questions that people in Connecticut have. But it is apparently, it's bad enough that people want a whole new train line, a whole new route into New York. If anyone's on the call and has experience with that route that goes down to Norwalk, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that actually, I have been told that improving that line would, in fact, in your Connecticut governor's draft transportation bill, there was money. I think it didn't go into the final one for MTA to not just to work on that line up to Danbury, but to put passenger service all the way to New Milford. From New Milford's point of view, and from the point of view of the more expensive cities to the south that have a lot of jobs, but housing that is not affordable, and apparently really some terrible road congestion, that having that access would be desirable. We'll have to hope that whoever's running, I guess it's MTA down there, that they will try to get some of this infrastructure money to improve that line too. It would be to everyone's advantage, I think. But our focus is going over, has always been on expert advice to focus on the Maybrook line going over to Southeast.
Thank you.
Thanks. I don't know if I feel that I can see there are a couple people on the call who have expertise on some of these things, although perhaps not on that particular section. All right, I see a question. I should read these questions. Would stations be repurposed for the railroad's use, or would the current station use be altered? How about eminent domain to make space? Eminent domain is very, very rarely used in the United States. Not because it's impossible, because the law does allow it, but it's a sort of public relations nightmare. My experience with people who own railroad stations, at least here in Berkshire County, is that for the right price, they'd be quite happy to sell the train station. They tend to actually be people who are fond of their train stations. I know the guy who owns the Great Barrington train station, and he's quite, he's quite attached to it. He can tell you about its, the paneling in the interior and so forth. It's not always the best thing to use the old station. Old stations, one of the challenges with older stations is that they have level platforms, that are level with the track. And modern trains have raised platforms. People walk up and step directly onto the train rather than, if you've ridden an Amtrak, at least in the one I catch in Hudson, you have, these yellow steps that you have to go up and down. But it's possible to make raised platforms out of an old-fashioned one. There's one I think it's Northampton. It's basically built out of plywood. It's nothing fancy. It's just a wooden platform that you walk up. There's another question specifically about Bank Street property. Bank Street, I know New Milford just a little, and it's really comparable to Great Barrington in many ways. In terms, it's bigger. It's about twice the size, but it's a sort of similar town, and we actually have matching town halls. Actually, literally twin town halls. But the merchants here in Great Barrington can see nothing better than to have passengers stepping off the train, wanting a meal or wanting to shop, or people coming in waiting for a train. It will create a great deal more economic activity for restaurants and shops, and any commercial establishment will benefit tremendously from having service right there. That's the whole point of transit-oriented development. It also means that, and I think that I understand that there are people in Danbury and in New Milford who've talked about this, about we find people are actually more and more enjoying living close to the amenities that they use regularly, the shops they like, the coffee shop they like to go to, the restaurants, the movies, and this means that actually living in downtown, even in a smaller town or city, can have some of that, the things that we like about cities is the variety, the diversity, the kind of the serendipity of wandering along and seeing different things, or having a choice of restaurants, for example. That's what having the more activity, thanks to passenger rail service, will bring all of our towns. And I'm just looking to see, as I said, all right, someone named Todd, I'm going to allow you to talk. And please forgive me for fumbling with this a bit. Are you there? Do we have any other questions?
It looks like there's one in the chat right now. A new question.
Sarah asks if there is a need for an extension from Southeast up to Pittsfield, and would it be a commuter or scenic excursion? Our focus is very much been not commuter, because I think of that as every day. Although in the post-COVID-19 world, I mean, we may think about commuting in a rather different way. There are many, many people who have come up to the Berkshires now who are working remotely, and who are thinking, and companies are thinking about whether they can continue some combination of remote work and coming into the office, coming in for meetings a few days a week. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But the thing about a commuter train compared to a long distance train, like Amtrak, think of the space, the more comfortable seats that can recline, better bathrooms, a food car. So we actually, it's a long enough trip. The trip to Pittsfield was and will be again about 3 hours and 55 minutes. So it's nearly 4 hours all the way at the kind of speeds that we think are feasible. And that's a long enough trip. You want to be comfortable. And in fact, a very extensive market research study was done in 2010. So it's a little out of date, but I think the principles actually, if anything, it would be more true now than then, that people want to be able to take bikes on trains. They want there to be space for their skis. They want Wi-Fi. They want food service. They want, not plush, but they want they want to have services that fit with the kind of lifestyle that they have and the reasons that they would be traveling up here. There are a lot of different reasons that people want to take trains, but one of them is that more and more young people are not interested in driving or owning a car. We have flexible car services now, so people have got used to taking an Uber or taking a Lyft, and riding bikes, using bike shares. People are simply not so wedded to the car. And I even know a politician in Massachusetts who, some years back, when I first talked to him about trains, he was not enthusiastic. He was a car guy, as simple as that. But he, after spending some time in Boston with some young staffers who said, how am I going to get to the Berkshires? I don't have a car. I don't have a driver's license. And why would you want to drive? That he's really changed his position. And in fact, now they've convinced him of how much better his life would be if he could get on a train and pull out his laptop and do some work or take a nap, instead of being stuck behind the wheel of, behind the steering wheel. I wonder if, Dave McCluskey, I saw that you had your hand up. Do you have anything you want to say? It's fine if you don't. I'm sorry, it's not fair to call on you. I just noticed I didn't get to you earlier when you'd put something up. Okay. I think then, if that's everything.
I think there's one last question from
there.
Sarah again about a timeline.
Right. Oh yes, thank you. Is there a realistic projected timeline for when this project would come to fruition? It really, as I said, low-hanging fruit. This could be done in a couple of years if there were will and the money. Now, compared to other train projects, the amount of money, the estimate we have is about $250 million. And the thing is that Massachusetts is already putting in nearly 50 million of that estimated amount. There has not been a detailed, a proper, full study. But we now know, because of the lines that are being put in Massachusetts, we know what that's costing. And I should, for those of you who love to have the numbers, I have, you know, people will bandy numbers about and say, oh, it'll cost so much money, it's just impossible. So they'll say, as somebody told me that she'd been told that it was going to cost $8 million a mile to restore that old line, that 37 miles of line from the border with Massachusetts down to New Milford, which is owned by the state, that it would cost $8 million a mile. It's just way too expensive. Well, the line in Massachusetts, which is really exactly the same kind of line and track and terrain, is being restored for roughly $1 million a mile. It's a very, very reasonable price in today's world. And compared to high-speed rail, that's the other thing about high-speed rail, is it probably starts at $100 million a mile. That's probably way too low, but that's a figure that I heard. So that would be, even if we could have high-speed rail, maybe we'd say it's not worth spending 100 times as much. There just isn't that much money. That would be a reasonable position to take. That's, in fact, that's something like the position that's going to be taken on the east-west line, I think. That even though some people would very much like to have super high-speed kind of Chinese-style trains, the money is just, the amount is simply too high, and it would take too long, and that we would rather have, the Western Mass Rail Coalition is really united in feeling that we would rather have something moderate sooner, and I think that that's certainly the approach that we take when it comes to the Housatonic Line. Please do join us, do follow us. We are quite, you know, we're working very hard, and fortunately with the help of my intern team, to provide information, to put things online, to make more available to you. We're happy to answer your questions. Please go to traincampaign.org and join us. We need your support. We welcome sponsorships. We have lots of things planned, and we welcome your ideas for further events or information that we can provide. We would be happy to work with you individually or with towns and organizations in Connecticut to make sure that as many people as possible know about this amazing prospect for our region that will really give all of us something, a wonderful opportunity today, and will create something really important for the next generation. Thank you for being with us today. And do stay in touch. We will be letting you know when we stream the full film, The Last Train to Pittsfield, in a couple of weeks. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.